All right. Welcome, everybody. I have got Sermine on the podcast today. We met through a previous podcast guest, Leanne Herron. She is the host of the, say it slow so I can find it, Happiness on Tap podcast. And she's been a guest. And Sermine and I met on a panel podcast that she did, and we were vibing. And I'm always happy to see other men in the work. And so I was curious to get to know, what he's up to and how he got to this work. And so invited him on the show, and here we go. Sermine, welcome, brother.
Thank you. It's a real pleasure to be here. I'm very excited to share, my slice of the world and my experience with how I navigate it and how I help other people to navigate it.
Absolutely, man. That's why we're here. Um, so I'm curious, did you always do this work and always interested in neurosomatic intelligence and all these cool things that we've been talking about, or was there a journey that led to that?
There's definitely a journey. I worked as a lighting tech in film and television for like 10 years.
Really?
But there was always an interest. I kind of trace it back to like a moment, I think, when I was about 6 years old. And I was very often the weird kid in school, like the one boy with long hair who wanted to play dinosaurs instead of trucks in war. And so, I'd get picked on and called names and things. And my mom said to me one day, you know, the names that people call you are the names that they are really calling themselves inside, but they can't, it's too hurtful to go there for themselves, so they do it to someone else.
Wow. That's
And
that's pretty deep for a 6 year old.
yeah, as a 6-year-old, that really a foundational piece of worldview.
You will be a shaman.
And so, building on that for the rest of my childhood and into adulthood, I've always had an ability to attune to most people, to really see them and to see people's potential as well, kind of to see the multi layers of what's happening here. And uh, you know, later in her life, my mom started to train into energy work and as a coach. Both of my grandparents were therapists, so it's already in my blood.
Mm,
Um, but it wasn't until I was working at uh, a plant medicine healing center in Costa Rica that I kind of got the permission.
mm.
Like for some reason, I needed permission to to start going into that field. And one of the facilitators there, I was there doing like videography and graphic design for the center. And one of the facilitators saw an aptitude and was like, you should maybe come in and start training into ceremony with us.
Mm.
And that was the permission that my secret heart of heart was so longing for. Uh,
And how old were you when that happened? The
that
permission
was
part.
that was around 29, I think.
Okay.
I was 29 and 30.
Yeah. And until
Um,
that, it seems like quite a bit of it's in your blood. It's in your family. Was there exposure to the work, or was that like the first time the door kind of opened?
there was exposure to the work. I So my partner at the time had a degree in psychology and was, in the periphery of that sort of realm, and personal growth and development and explorations of spirituality was always a part of my life.
Mm-hmm.
It just wasn't a part of my professional life or my practice.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Uh, Working at a medicine center, I would say, was not for me. It was a great entry point, but medicine centers are very complicated. And uh, so when I left, I was still carrying this like permission to move into a new career and
Hmm.
honor this part of me um, I'd really valued in secret for the longest time. But I was looking at a lot of, that was a time when I think it's still the case, but there was a real boom in like ayahuasca tourism, and psychedelics was like the thing.
Hmm.
Um, and there's a lot of people for whom psychedelics are not right for, and that you're not hearing a lot of that
Hmm.
in kind of the rhetoric around it. It's like psychedelics are good for everyone. And so when I was thinking about, where am I going to start my journey as a practitioner, the first place that I wanted to go are how do I get the tools that are going to support the people for whom the big releases are not for and the psychedelic journeys are not for, because you know everybody's jumping into this pool and they're having these deep enormous experiences, like great for them. What about all the people who can't, or who are jumping in and then they're coming out the other end and they're like, wow, that just totally messed me up.
That,
uh,
that's really interesting, and I've had my experience with psychedelics was much more recreational in the beginning, and have taken a break from that. And these days, it's more of like a microdose here and there. I want to wait until my system's a little bit more regulated for that. But I would love for you to tell us just a couple of, give us an example of people that maybe aren't ready for a big cathartic release and what that looks like.
sure, yeah, absolutely. um, Anyone, I would say, who finds it difficult to experience the physical body sensations,
Mm,
or um, to go in and access emotions. If there's a barrier to accessing emotions, sometimes psychedelics can break that barrier, and it's amazing. But also, there's a good chance that uh, that barrier is there for a reason, and that reason is that the nervous system doesn't yet have the capacity, like you were just saying, to
hmm.
hold it all at once.
Hmm.
And so to just crack it right open is going to be overwhelming
Yep.
instead of um, integrating.
Hmm.
Um,
It's kind of
Highly
like that.
sensitive nervous systems, also really highly sensitive nervous systems, are going to overload, um, potentially, right?
Yeah.
Psychedelics are so unpredictable. You never know what the experience is going to be. Um, but when you have a sensitive nervous system, the risk is always, higher. People
Hmm.
with higher ACE scores, um, there's there's often um, places in the nervous system that the conscious mind is not ready to hold it yet. It doesn't know how. There isn't the safety there to hold it, and so to be able to have like a practice to create safety, to expand that capacity first. If psychedelics is in their future, which it doesn't have to be, then to have some way to really stabilize and make familiar all of these sensations that have been suppressed or repressed for so long.
Hmm.
um, Really important.
Hmm. I can certainly understand that. Had some guests on the show even that have had the ripping the band-aid off and exposing the iceberg that's underneath. And I feel like often somebody, I mean, in this society, myself included, until last couple of years, it's like the Amazon Prime of healing. We want it next day delivery, right? And we get pissed off when we don't have that. So we'll get into the parts work in a little bit and talk about that. But when you and when we have that band-aid ripped off, you can't put Pandora back in its box. And it's like, hey, now you got to learn to live with this and integrate this. And it can feel like our whole experience, because it's exposing all of the unconscious stuff that our nervous system, our body, our unconscious mind has been working really hard to keep down. And
Yeah.
bringing that stuff up, overwhelming can be, is like an understatement, right? So I'm curious how often do you see people come in that aren't ready, and what do you do with those type of people? Is there any type of like education or screening, or is it like anything that's making money and it's like get people in here and hope for the best kind of thing, and maybe support them on the way out? How do you guys deal with that?
Yeah, so I don't work with psychedelics currently.
Hmm.
I'm not part of the center or any center right now.
Yeah.
I can see room for that maybe in my future.
Hmm.
But I have experienced so much change through parts work and nervous system regulation.
Hmm.
But I do sometimes, have people who come in and they're like, I think I might want to do this. I think this might be, I'm feeling the call.
Hmm.
And what I do is, it's I make sure and give the education, uh, wherever you're going to be doing this, uh, really, same as with a job interview, right? Where like you're getting interviewed, but you're also interviewing them to see if this is a
Hmm.
good fit for you. You want to
Hmm.
see as you go through their intake process, are
Hmm.
they asking the right questions? Are you
Hmm.
feeling seen? Are all your concerns being addressed?
Hmm.
Um, and you know, is there a medical part of intake? Uh, is there a mental health part of their intake?
Hmm.
And then if you're comfortable and you're confident with the whoever's going to be holding the space for you, whether it's ceremonial or whether it's clinical, let's get you some tools so that you can start to have some stability in your system going into it, and you can have something that is already familiar to your
Hmm.
system,
Hmm.
so that when you're actually in the experience, it's
Hmm.
something that your unconscious can reach for if it's
Hmm.
starting to feel overwhelmed or if it needs grounding and stability.
Hmm. Yeah.
Um,
Yeah, that makes a lot
so
of sense.
much yeah, when I think really, really important piece of uh, doing this work, especially when we're getting into the shadow, which for anyone who's not familiar with that term, it's not, you know, the bad parts of us. The shadow is just the parts that we're not aware of.
Yeah.
And when we're getting into that, it can be really scary for
Yeah.
for the nervous system.
Hmm.
Even if it's not scary on a conscious level, it's
Hmm.
scary on an unconscious survival level, because it's in the shadow for a reason, because it
Hmm.
was a threat once.
Yep.
And so when we have those fears come up, it's really vital to have something that's already familiar to help with the regulation, because
Like a
uh,
resource, is that what you mean?
like a resource,
Yeah.
like a neuro tool, like some kind of a body-based practice, because in those like fear states or survival responses, high stress um, states of being, the ability to be in conscious choice, the ability to respond rather than
Yeah.
react, really goes away. And you only
Okay.
have access to what is already familiar. And so if you make familiar some tools that you know are really healthy for you,
Hmm.
then it's a game changer,
Hmm.
you know.
That would, and some examples of things like that would be like containment, like having a safe person, maybe having some education on board about the process and ways to anchor ourselves. Is there anything else you would add to that?
Those are all wonderful.
Hmm.
And I would go even more into the realm of body-based practices.
Okay.
So this is going to be different for everyone, because every nervous system is different.
Hmm.
So, for example, this is why I don't teach neuro tools on social media,
Okay.
because you need to be able to assess for yourself whether this tool is going to be good for your system or not, whether it's going to be regulating for your system or not. So for some people, it might be breathing exercises. For some
Okay.
people, it might be a vagus nerve stimulus, or it
Hmm.
might be a cranial nerve reset.
Hmm.
It might be uh, a feeling of pressure, or a self-soothing, a havening type of technique, or
Yeah.
something like that, where
Yeah.
you're really speaking directly to the body through its senses.
Mm. I love that. I know that that's something that we talked about early on, and working with Irene Lyon, and it's resourcing and learning how to build awareness, and it went from the journey of using external resources like nature, a pet, a friend, to building more of these internal resources that it seems like what you're talking about, where it's like, man, it feels really good just to give myself a hug. And one of the most powerful things I've learned this year is like, wow, it feels really good when I talk nice to myself. It's like,
Yeah.
wow, these really simple things, they can be soothing. And I can imagine too, going into this type of unconscious, where the unconscious is, or the unconscious filter that we have on the world is kind of busted wide open, and we're getting to feel everything all at once. And there's such a parallel to this work. I think step one, I don't know if there is a step one, but one thing we want to do in the beginning is just getting used to being with sensation. Because if we've been living in a functional freeze where a faux window of tolerance that says, oh, this feels safe because I don't have to feel the things that I don't want to feel, the emotions, the sensations. When I think of psychedelics, ripping that band-aid off and feeling that all at once, I could see how that could be helpful. But if we have been doing this, pushing it down for so long, feeling that all at once is a lot. And I was just commenting on a post this morning where I used to want this big Amazon Prime, release, and I've just really come to appreciate the boring, tiny little drops of safety for someone who, especially, has never experienced that, doesn't know what safety feels like, and has worked really hard to not feel that stuff. And so, if that's the case, and we're unaware of it, yeah, getting we think we want aliveness, we want that life force energy back, but that's a lot for somebody who's been living in survival.
Yeah, yeah, and I'd love to speak to well, not only that it's not just psychedelics that can rip that Band-Aid off. It's somatic experiencing can do that. Somatic movement can do that.
Yep.
One of the kind of roles that neurosomatic intelligence plays is it bridges the gap between talk therapy and somatics.
Hmm.
So
Let's unpack
I
that,
was
man. That
working.
sounds awesome.
Yeah. So I was working kind of at the what is it, the sanctuary tent at a festival.
Yeah, yeah.
And we had a woman come to the tent who, was not on any drugs, was fine, but had just come from a somatic, like experiencing workshop
Hmm.
where they were doing all of this, movement and opening of the body. And like she was super overwhelmed. It was like, I just need a quiet place. I don't know what's going on. And it was like, yeah, absolutely. Uh, no um, consciousness altering substance involved, emotions being held in the body in ways, the body, it holds tension and it compensates for
Hmm.
certain emotions that are
Wow.
linked by association to experiences in the past. And, as long as it's frozen, you don't have to feel it. You don't have to go back into that somatic memory. It doesn't even have to be a conscious memory.
Hmm.
And then as it starts to come up, the physiology of the body changes in order to respond or to relive that experience.
And
And
what might
that
that give
was
us an example of that? What might that look like?
uh, the reliving of that.
Well, like having that experience come, like the body orienting to that.
Oh, um, let's say you're in a yoga class or something. You're
Yeah.
doing a lot of hip opening.
Yep.
If you have any kind of trauma in the
Hmm.
pelvic region at all, and it's been held and suppressed, has been compensated for,
Hmm.
and then you have to feel it, um, it could come out, so the nervous system creates a lot of different kind of outputs to deal with stress and overwhelm.
Hmm.
So it might come out as coping mechanisms, it might come out as anxiety, it might come out as shutdown or
Collapse. Yeah.
freeze, binging, whatever it is that's your kind of coping mechanisms.
Hmm.
Um, they're going to all fire up
Hmm.
to try and put this back because it holds a huge threat to the system,
Hmm.
a threat that it's not. resource. It's not tooled enough to actually know how to handle.
And those coping mechanisms was a way that the body dealt with the threat. It's a way that the body kept us safe. And it's going, whoa, 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 whoa. We said this is unsafe and we're trying to keep this down. And now you're opening this Pandora's box again, and this is too much. And so that's
Yeah.
why we would, pendulate or titrate or do a little bit and then come back to safety. But if we don't feel that edge, if you will, in that yoga class, if we don't have the body-based awareness to go like, man, whew, I need a break for a second, we go right past that finish line or right past the overwhelming point, and we're there before we even knew it. So this person went to a group class where we're doing what feels good, we're moving and doing these things, and it's like if we treat it like an exercise and we're not in the body and we miss that yellow light that says slow down, and we haven't experienced that edge before, we're in the red zone before we even know it. And I think that's a really smart, intelligent thing to notice, like, hey, I'm not on drugs, but I need some help here.
Yeah, yeah. Kudos to her for sure. And that actually kind of brings me right to the other piece of this that I wanted to mention, which is that the ability to feel
Mm,
what's going on inside. And there's so for listeners who aren't familiar with the term interoception,
yeah.
it's basically just the words internal and perception. So it's your
Mm,
ability to sense what's going on inside, and that can be emotions, thoughts. It can also be sensations, temperature. Whether you have to go to the bathroom or not. These are all sensations that we can feel.
mm,
And there's a couple of different things, deficits that we can have, especially if one of our coping mechanisms has been repression for a long
mm,
time, which is we can have interoceptive inaccuracy. And that
mm.
can be uh, with the ability to perceive. So we just don't even feel when, we
Yeah,
cut off entirely.
yeah.
Or we can have an interpretation deficit where we
Mm,
feel something, but our interpretation of what it is that we're feeling is inaccurate, or it's skewed by its association with some kind of previous experience, some kind
so
of
it's
trauma or
overcoupled,
loss of safety,
kind of overcoupling, like something, a behavior or a sensation, and adding additional fear to that.
uh, or a misinterpretation of what it means.
Yeah.
You might feel hunger, and it's getting perceived as a threat signal.
Ah, interesting. Yeah.
And so when there are blind spots in our interoception, it becomes easier and easier um, uh, to get into places, if we're starting to engage with movement or somatic practices, or, wherever we're going, it's easier to blow past those boundaries and not know that they're there until it's too late and you're in
Yeah.
the hurricane of confusion, emotions, and
Oh yeah.
coping mechanisms.
Yeah, yeah. Been there, done that.
Yeah.
Then when we experience that, we go, oh, okay. Now we're going to talk about titration, and we're going to get those resources, and we're going to learn to slow down. And so, someone like me who has blown past that line many, many, many times, and is like, I just want to come out of survival mode. It's like, yeah, but now I want to do it just a little bit slower or a lot slower.
Yeah. Yeah. I think I mentioned this in our panel, but my approach is uh, really all geared around gentleness
Mm,
and what it means to be tender in a way that is strong, that is structured, that is
mm.
containing. And so rather than pushing past a boundary or pushing outside of the comfort zone, which risks breaking internal trust,
Interesting.
um, instead, I ask, what does it look like to expand the comfort and the safety so that it begins to encompass all of these changes that you want to
Hmm.
make?
Hmm. So does that mean like if we want to be gentle, we want to go slow, we don't want to work outside of our capacity? Is it we want to stay way below that capacity, or are we kind of going up against that edge a little bit and then coming back into safety? Or is it how would you feel with that?
Uh, I would say, it really depends on who it is.
Mm-hmm.
Some people, really get a lot out of needing that edge,
Mm-hmm.
and that's safe for them.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but for other people, it's not safe to meet that edge because there's been so many repetitions of coming up to that edge being a break in trust or being a
Yeah.
violation of one's own boundaries.
Yeah.
And so, um,
That's something that shifts, it sounds like. Like I can see myself in that description early on, blowing past, not knowing it. And then what I think helped so much was really doing slow, boring stuff that felt like I wasn't doing any work. And that over time built my capacity so that I could trust the edge more.
yeah, there's a couple things here that come to my mind right away that I want to touch on. Um, One is the importance of rest
Oh, yeah.
and taking a break
Mm-hmm.
because uh, as humans, it's important, male, female, uh, other, we still have cycles. And one of the most important ones is the rest growth cycle.
Mm-hmm.
I'm sure everyone can relate to the experience of, learning a new skill and really like pushing it and trying to learn and get better and better and better. And then going and like hitting a plateau and then
Mm-hmm.
going and sleeping and coming back. And all of a sudden you're like way better at it.
Oh man, that reminds me a story from like high school football and lifting every single day all the time. And then I would get thinking I just want to get big and strong and be a good football player. But I remember getting sick and taking a week off and coming back and being so much stronger. And it's like, oh, and I feel like that's such a good analogy to the work because we're just constantly observing and learning capacity and going, oh man, rest is awesome. And really just like in the analogy of lifting weights, it's like you don't build muscle in the gym. You build muscle when you rest and eat food. You know,
Yeah,
you're breaking muscle down in the gym, and that rest is so important for integration and for healing and for growth.
there's actually uh, quite a number of overlaps between working out and doing neurotraining.
Okay.
I actually use that as an analogy myself. Um, but yeah, uh, we can't integrate unless we rest because that always on, and this goes for healing and recovery too. Like I definitely run into people and they're like, I've been on this healing journey for years and I'm really struggling. Like, have you tried just like taking a break for a
Oh,
week or a month and not trying to push yourself?
well, that's when you
That's
go,
definitely,
but if I do that, then I'll, that's the
yeah,
fear, like holding that back. But, and I want to pause right there because that's been me. That's something that I had to experience here recently of just doing, and learning how to be. But like for someone who doesn't know how to rest, like give us some ideas, like what does that look like?
yeah. Uh, Rebuilding or building for the first time an experience that is either unsafe or that is new and therefore unsafe in the nervous system
Hmm.
is tricky, and it definitely takes some of that titration, that slow,
Hmm.
gradual. One of the things we talk about a lot in neurosomatic intelligence is dosage,
Mm.
minimum effective dose.
Yeah.
And it doesn't matter if this is like a one of the greatest um, high payoff tools that you've ever experienced, and it makes you feel so good and so regulated. If you do it at a high enough dose, it's going to stop being a positive tool for your system.
Yeah.
Um, and so finding what is the dosage where you can come back from the experience of rest.
Hmm.
And
And it's
also, this
probably
is a
way much
great,
less than what we think for that
probably.
person. Yeah.
I had one of my teachers would say um, the amount of like the dosage you want to be laughably easy.
Hmm.
So like not yeah, I can handle that, but like, are you kidding me?
Yeah.
Like, and then some.
Yeah.
So that's a great starting point.
Hmm.
And there's um, this is why I like to bring in parts work as well, because it's one thing to start to practice an activity that has historically been unsafe,
Mm-hmm.
which we're talking about rest. It could be rest, it could be feeling like anger, it could be feeling joy, it could be receiving. Like there's so many different parts of our experience that can get labeled in our system as unsafe, but we
Mm-hmm.
know we want it
Mm-hmm.
and that it's healthy for us. So it's really great to have a tool that's going to be regulating for your system, that's
Mm-hmm.
going to create safety. And when I say regulation, I don't mean calm, because um, if you're like in extreme parasympathetic, like a flop
Mm-hmm.
state, a
Mm-hmm.
depressive state, regulation means you want to come up from that. You want more activation.
Yep.
So regulation is more about like coming to what you're coming into the flexibility where you can be in whatever state is right for you and your environment.
Mm-hmm.
And so if you have the tools that do that on a body level, then you can really give yourself that safe regulating stimulus, and then you can engage with the activity that is a threat or
Mm-hmm.
unfamiliar. And then you can give yourself after that another dose of this safe regulating stimulus. And by sandwiching the new thing between these like pillars of safe experiencing, you're actually retraining the brain because it goes, oh, this thing in the middle actually isn't that big of a threat because I get safety on both ends.
Mm-hmm.
And that's how you start to repair. Um, Sometimes it's nice also in that sandwich to have some release. So when you do the activity, then you can kind of like shake it out, do some like vocal releases, a bit of stomping, maybe some impact to the bones or some tapping or something, just to kind of discharge the stress of being
Mm-hmm.
with the new thing. And then you regulate and you go, okay, body, unconscious, this is okay.
Yeah. Yeah,
And
it's slowly bringing in the thing that's scary with a resource so that we're able to be with that experience a little bit more. And then we're kind of holding these two things of safety and something that was a little bit overwhelming. And we're letting the brain go like, hey, yeah, this is uncomfortable. And we get to go back into this thing that feels good. And it's like,
mhm,
I always hear, what's it like to hold both? And we're able to see like, oh, maybe it's not as scary as I thought it was if I'm able to come back and have my safe place, my resource, and my system can feel that spike, release some of that tension or emotional charge, whatever's associated with that, come back into window of tolerance. And it's like, the brain is creating these new experiences and it gets new updated information.
yeah. Just like working out is about getting the reps.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so
Yes, safety is built
creating,
through repetition. Love that.
yeah. Well, and a big part of that is because um, like everything's a skill. This is like an applied neuro perspective, is that everything your body does is a skill. A lot of things that folks may be identifying with as parts of their personality, often they are skills that have been trained. I don't have good memory. I'm a people pleaser. I'm this, like, these are skills. I'm an anxious person. That's a skill that has been
Mm-hmm.
trained. And so the brain areas that activate in order to have those experiences, they're really strong. And when a brain area is strong, it makes it easier to activate, which then makes it stronger.
Mm-hmm.
And so you get these feedback loops. And these can be the kind of downward spirals, but you can do the opposite and you can get upward spirals as you start to do reps of positive stimulus. So
Mm-hmm.
every time you give your brain something new, some new stimulus, it forces it to reevaluate and adapt.
Mm-hmm.
And so getting those reps of this is safe starts to disentangle the parts of the brain area that originally held that thing as unsafe
Mm-hmm.
and strengthen the new areas.
Mm-hmm.
And I think about it, like I often will say, it moves like the speed it works at is like a minute hand, where if you're looking at it, it's not moving. But as soon as you look away and you look back, it's a different time.
That's an interesting analogy. I've never heard that before.
Yeah,
It's like it
like
sounds like,
it's like a watched pot never boils, you know. As soon as you stop paying attention to it, it does the thing. You
oh,
know, it's
so we take pressure. Okay, so for me, that reminds me of like looking at our system. Maybe we have a pattern of, oh, I experience this thing that I want, I get activated, I shut down, I see that pattern. Now I'm experiencing it with a resource, with a safe person or place, and I have more capacity for that. Oh wow, this time, yeah, I felt the scary feeling. I was able to be with it, to regulate. I didn't shut down. Um, and over time, we're rewiring that pathway in the brain that says this is scary, and so I have to do it, and we create a new response from it. But
mhm.
if in the process of that, if we're going like, you better do this right now, hurry up, Amazon Prime happened tomorrow. I did my somatic practice with my coach, and today I'm not healed. That pressure is like trying to watch water and make it boil. But it's so interesting when we remove that pressure and we move away from the system, and it's like, oh, it did it on its own.
Yeah. And there's so many things I want to talk about. Uh,
We
I
got plenty of
love to
time,
re
man.
I love to reframe um, uh, our the changes that we want to make from goals to systems,
Okay.
because when you have a goal, you're in failure until you've hit the goal. And your system doesn't really like to be in failure.
Oh wow.
But if you implement a system, every single time that you engage with the system, that is a win. And so it creates a much more positive, like supportive trajectory for you to be working in,
I really like
and is going to get you there, a lot easier and a lot faster than if you're just like beating yourself up because you haven't reached the goal yet.
Mm. Oh man, I love that. So I'll be vulnerable and share myself right now. So it's like right at what I'm seeing with my progress in my work is like I'll be um, out of survival for a little bit of time, and it's amazing, it's incredible, and I'll go back in, and it's like, ugh, I can see how with the example you just gave it that I'm making coming out of survival a goal, right?
Mm,
And each time I go back into the survival mode, which is understandably the way that my body protected me for 40 years. How could I look at that differently instead of making my goal to come out of survival? How can I make that? How could I slightly reframe that and relate to myself a little bit better?
oh yeah, for sure. Um, Couple things. One is every time that survival comes back in, there's a reason for it.
Okay,
And
good, like
so
that.
and so you know, we're going to get into parts work at some point. There's a part of you that is really trying to protect.
Yep.
It really cares and it's seeing some kind of threat. And there is a possibility that the threat that it's perceiving is living in your shadow. And so you're not aware of what it is. And so this part's stepping up to protect you from something. And if it's possible to have gratitude for that part, it doesn't matter if you want it to change. You're like, I'm so sick of going into this, but thank you for caring about me. This part that's doing it.
I love that.
The other thing is that um, one of the things that you're strengthening by going in and out is the ability to be flexible and to have both, and for um, for more regulation, because we're not meant, our nervous system is not meant to be a flat line. We're not always meant to be calm and happy.
Hmm.
We're meant to ebb and flow.
Hmm.
And the more that you come back out, the more repetitions you have of what it feels like to restore safety.
Mm.
And so those parts of your brain that can then go, nope, I'm safe. This is not the way things used to be. the more stable that becomes.
Mm-hmm.
It's a lot like relapse in addiction. Relapse is not failure, it's a part of healing addiction.
Mm-hmm.
Because if you're not, if there's a sobriety and then nothing else, um, you know, there's the pathways that bring you back out are not strong. And so there can be a greater risk if it happens. It's like the higher you get, the farther the fall.
Mm-hmm.
And so if there is that, and I'm going to say that there's this is not a capital T truth when it comes to addiction. Everyone's process is different with this. Um, but when you're working with um, this addiction is a big piece of how I cope with the world, how I function, how I um, uh, um, can be present or not with these needs or these boundaries that are really painful. To just take away the scaffold that helps with that without something else being in there is really unhelpful,
Mm-hmm.
and really destabilizing. And so it
Mm-hmm.
can be more valuable to have a little bit of back and forth as you start to come out of it, so that um, you are
Is it experiencing contrast?
experiencing contrast, but also experiencing it uh, in a way that isn't that kind of like goal mindset where it's like, this is a part of me, this is a part of my process, and there's the part of me that can come back out and
Mm-hmm.
stabilize and be okay
Mm-hmm.
having having experienced a setback.
Yeah.
Like the
Hmm.
ability to be in discomfort and to experience setbacks to get back up,
Mm-hmm.
that's an important experience to have.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, instead of it's allowing us to observe it more, to be in the pattern, and it's kind of like going back to that weightlifting thing. Like we're learning how to come out, and it's like, oh, yes, I chose to go back into this. It's giving us agency as well. It sounds like I chose to interact with this substance, maybe, or whatever it is, and I see how that feels. There's a little bit of contrast, and I'm able to pull myself out with my new tools to come back into regulation. And there's a new experience for the brain, and it's like, well, maybe I have. I start to hear those two things, and I'm like, eventually, is it like I don't have to have this experience that doesn't feel good to my system? Maybe I can choose that standing up process, and that becomes the new anchor, the new regulation tool.
Yeah, yeah, and there's a lot more confidence in the ability to stand back up.
Mm-hmm.
I think another analogy that I can use is relationships and attachment styles. And there's the person who um, is gonna come out of an unhealthy relationship pattern, and they're gonna remain single for a year or years, and then be like, okay, I'm free of that. Thank goodness.
Mm-hmm.
And then they're going to go into another relationship, and it's going to be the same one, versus someone who's going to come out of that relationship and really do some digging rather than just creating distance. It's going to do some digging and maybe play around with some new relationship structures uh, in a way where they can feel where the attachment style is, like what it is, and how to start to change that,
Mm-hmm.
so that when they get to several years later and they're like, all right, I'm ready for, a stable long-term relationship again, they have they have done a bunch of work in between, uh, kind of um, digging into and looking in that shadow area, which, you know, nobody likes to experience being triggered.
Mm.
But there's no better way to figure out what is in your shadow than to get triggered.
Hmm. Yeah. It kind of reminds me of like being in the healing journey in like a cocoon state where maybe we're not interacting with society as much as we used to, and we could, avoid that, and maybe we build some capacity, and we're like, I'm ready to do this. But if I have not worked with the parts of me that feels unsafe, then I'm just going to go back to the old patterns and coping mechanisms, which can probably lead to shame and beating myself up. And um, maybe that's why somebody stops doing the work instead of, building safety, understanding what are my triggers. I know that I used to feel a trigger and go, man, not again. More and more, not that I've nailed this, but it's like, oh, this is information of what my body needs for support and to actually feel safe. And now, if I can work through that, then I've got more capacity for discomfort. And kind of going back to what you said about regulation does not mean that we don't have difficult and emotions and sensations in the body. It's more that we don't get stuck or go into this pattern of shutting down or addiction or whatever that may look like. And we're able to be with that experience a little bit more over time.
Yeah, and I'd also just like to say that um, these examples are kind of to illustrate a point and not to say that it's wrong to take a break
Yeah.
because everyone's journey is so different. And there's a lot of, I've had this conversation a number of times with people about, how do you know when the right move for you is to go and be introspective and just to be with yourself? And when is it right to be in community and to, you know, engage with some of those uncomfortable, vulnerable places with others?
Mm-hmm.
And there's no right time, there's no right answer, or it's really feeling into it for your individual journey.
Mm-hmm. And not going. I would say probably not coming from this place of, I need to or this makes sense right now. It's more this natural, intuitive, like, man, this impulse that I want to be with people again, and that feels good, and learning how to titrate that likely.
Yeah, and that kind of goes, right back to what we were talking about as far as expanding the safety and the comfort to encompass the changes you want to make.
Mm-hmm.
I think one of the really great guides is, am I feeling the call? Am I feeling excitement to
Mm-hmm.
go to this place? It was an edge and it was scary, but now I'm feeling excitement towards it.
Yeah.
That is a great sign that your safety has encompassed that place.
Yeah.
Because when we have safety, we as humans love novelty. We want new things.
Mm-hmm.
If we're struggling to make new things happen, it's a good chance that it's because there's way too much stress in the system.
There's a lot of that's where the beliefs and the sensations in the body are letting us know, this isn't safe, and we got to meet those things and work through them, and that ultimately opens up capacity and choice, and we're going to move towards what feels good, and probably do a little bit of this whenever things don't feel so good, right?
Absolutely. Yeah. And it can be on so many levels. It can be uncomfortable to respect those little shifts, the yeses and the nos
Mm-hmm.
that you feel in the body. Um, assuming that that it's possible to feel those, because as with the interoceptive deficits we were talking about earlier, it may take a little bit of training to where you can feel if you're getting a yes or you're getting a no. And then once you can, you get the challenge of honoring them.
Yeah. Yeah. What do I do with this new information? And I think that's where this year, what I have learned that has been the most impactful thing is accepting and allowing what's here and trusting that what is here is the next thing instead of, it has to be like this or you should be like this, bringing that shame and fear and force into it.
I mean, you're speaking right to my process right now.
Well, well, tell me about your process. What's that look like?
I mean, the process that I've personally been going through, especially
Mhm.
around business,
Yeah.
which is, it has to be this way, it has to look like that, I have to have these things in place. And um, there's so much of that, the control of it that comes from a fear of, I don't actually know what I'm doing. And the more that I let go of that and I trust the intuition that calls me to step in and to say something now and to, let it be and not try and do anything, those are the things that actually move the needle. Like the
Yeah.
number of times over the past year where I'm like hammering away at the business and like, okay, I got to make it work, got to do this, set up this, make an account there, post something. Um, and then I take a break. I'm like, okay, I'm done. I got to take like a week off. That week off is when new clients come in,
I know.
when something shifts. When, like,
It's so funny. Business coaches hate me because they're like, "How do you get your clients?" And I'm typically like, "I manifest them. They come, and it really does click what you just said about when we stop the doing and we allow it to show up. It does, and so my black or white thinking wants to go. Well, then I'll just go sit on the beach and have margaritas, and all my clients will show up, right?
wouldn't that be something?
But it's probably like, yeah, that's exactly what happened. They probably find you sitting on the beach. I'm curious if you have an example of how that's shown up in your life and your business this past year.
I mean, other than every time I take a break, someone comes in. I've,
They're
uh,
waiting at your door when you get back from the beach.
yeah, uh, a part of it is also, um, I one of the reasons that I went the neurosomatic route and the kind of parts work coaching route, in part because I saw these as tools that really, really help and move the needle for people in a way that is safe and stable. Um, and there's also a lot of science, especially behind the neurosomatic intelligence, and that's really safe. But I work also in like the in some spiritual realms, doing some ancestral work, um, doing a little like pre-Christian folk tradition work. Like where is it, especially like for me as a white person who is not indigenous to America. This was a part of my journey when I came back from the center. At the center, ceremonies were being held by indigenous Shipibo um, Peruvian healers. And I'm like, this isn't my tradition. So where is it that is something that I can connect to through many generations back? Where is
It's
it that
interesting.
my indigeneity lives? When was it when there were practices that were land based? And what does that look like for me when I'm on land that is different than the land where my ancestors practiced these things?
That's a really
And
interesting take.
yeah, and how do I interact with that dynamic, and also, who are the non-human relations that are part of those practices, those ancient practices and modern practices, because they're different. My ancestors are from the British Isles,
Mhm.
and this is the desert of New Mexico. Very different plants. So as I begin to open up and share that kind of stuff, it's way more authentic for me. And I will have people reach out to me when I, send out an email to my list that contains some of that and say, wow, I was really feeling this. And when I'm just sharing about nervous system regulation and it's a lot more cut and dry and clinical,
Mhm.
uh, you know, there's something about that on that unconscious level that it doesn't resonate as much with people because it's not all of me. And so the
It's not
more,
authentic, and that really shines through for people, is what it sounds like.
yeah, yeah, for sure. And so, yeah, in the business, a big part that, I'm going to be working on into this year for sure is how to really honor those parts of myself in a way that's vulnerable
Mhm.
and it's public.
Yeah, and that's a lot, man. That's a lot. That's asking a lot for your nervous system and shows quite a bit of capacity. I mean, I think being seen is a big trigger for a lot of people.
For sure. And I'm gonna say it it demonstrates some capacity, and it also demonstrates the fact that I've got a whole like catalog of neuro tools that I can go and do afterwards in order to re-regulate when my nervous system is freaking out because I was just really vulnerable.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I mean, that's something that I noticed. Let's be vulnerable again for Mitch is like, man, doing these podcasts, I'll be sweating like crazy at some of them, especially with people that I don't know, and that we get in some deeper, heavier the conversation we were just having about vulnerability. I could feel it in my body. I had a little neuro tool myself over here where I'm holding my hand on my leg and giving it a little bit of containment and saying like, hey, it's okay, I'm right here, and
Heck
because I
yeah, I
can
love
feel that
that.
stuff coming up too. And I
Yeah,
think that's
that's
a
so
part of the
perfect.
journey. Thank God we have these tools, you know.
Yeah, absolutely. One of the things that I really like about um, a good handful of the neuro tools that I have is like that. They're things that can be done really subtly.
Hmm.
And I think it's really amazing to to be able to model that and say like, yeah, I may look like I've got my shit together, but I'm doing neuro tools down here.
Get out of my head, man. That's like my whole journey with like I think I've been trying to prove to people that I'm not what it's shown on the outside. You know, it's like when I was really sick, going to doctors and
Mm,
I'm going like, you look like you're in great shape. Like, what's going on? You're in great health. I'm like, I'm dying on the inside, and I got really good at being vulnerable. I learned many times in my life that if I can be vulnerable, that I can share. And you can even take that to more of a shadowy side where it's like I have to explain over and over to be seen, like nobody's seeing me here. But what I learned is if I'm vulnerable, that's putting more information into the space, and if I'm with someone who's kind, who's compassionate, who can attune, even a good enough, if you will, then there's more information to be seen and almost like normalize the experience and saying like, yeah, me too, and yeah, here's what I use, and so both of us can benefit and grow and be a little bit more comfortable with the things that have historically been uncomfortable, and that's what this work is.
yeah, that's really incredible. Like kudos to you. That's
Yeah, man.
that's big work.
Yeah.
Um, I definitely find that it feels counterintuitive, at least the way that I was raised, and I think the way that a lot of people, especially men, have been raised in our society, is that it's not the places where we're most comfortable where we connect the deepest. It's actually the pain where we connect the most deeply with one another.
Hmm.
Like those are the things that we
Oh,
have
yeah.
so much in common. And when someone can be seen, when their pain can be seen, it's like a game changer. It's so different to experience being witnessed authentically and having your pain validated and witnessed authentically. Um, like
And how
I can speak
exhausting it
for,
is to have to wear all the mask and
oh my
perform,
God.
but there's so much of a journey of first having getting to see that stuff. We don't even
Hmm.
know we're wearing masks and performing, and why we're exhausted is because we're doing that. And how much
Hmm.
easier when we can take that pressure off ourselves and be ourselves. But that's a whole journey of feeling comfortable enough being weird, being yourself.
It's so counterintuitive.
This whole work is counterintuitive. You know, it's like, but because we get conditioned through society that is so different than the indigenous roots and the natural way of relating, that a humanist that we have, to be, you know, looking to the external to feel like we're wrong or bad, or to be steeped in fear, and to not listen to this. Like, don't you dare listen to this and be you. You know, you put up
Yeah.
all these versions of yourself that you have deemed uncomfortable, hold down the ones that are not, and you know, just put your clown face on and smile. But the cool thing, like you're talking about, is that when we can be vulnerable and we can wipe the paint off and be like, yeah, I'm broken. I'm not broken, but I'm hurting inside and I've got these things that I don't like and I'm going to show you those. And it's like when I can be myself and somebody like or a group or a community like takes you in and is like, yeah, we're weird too and we like that stuff too and encourage you to be more of yourself. Like, wow, I feel like I just see like the caterpillar like breaking out of the cocoon and flapping its wings, and that's what I'm trying to do on this podcast is um, share that myself and highlight people that are doing that. And I think it's what the world needs right now.
Yeah. It's so easy to forget, while we try and hide our own wounds, it's so easy to forget that everyone else is also really wounded.
And you can't deny that when you get into this work. You feel so isolated and you feel like it's me and I'm the only one that gets the shit kicked out of them and has got it so hard. But that's what vulnerability is, the gift that vulnerability gives us. If we go, hey, yeah, me too, bro, and that's I mean that's in the mentorship that I was in with Irene Lyon. That's I almost dropped out in the first couple of months because it was me and like maybe one or two guys and 30, 40 women and I would be I would be shutting down at the end of every class. We had these exercises that were meant to be vulnerable, and eventually I was like, guys, I'm freaking out. What is going on? And they're like, yeah, me too, man. And I was like, oh, really? And there was a lot of good conversation and dialogue. But if I'd have held that in, then I'd still be stuck in that. So like, it's courageous. It's vulnerability. It's doing a little bit at a time. It's getting that feedback from a positive group or a container that feels safe, and then we can let the mask off and we can be human and we can be authentic, and it's a whole lot more energy that comes with that too. If we're not, it's like sitting on top of a, I love this analogy, it's like sitting on top of a beach ball in the water and holding that beach ball down and then but trying to use our hands and be us and do this, and it's like that's a lot of work. We can just go, hey, I got a beach ball, I'm sitting on a beach ball, I'm just gonna let it sit here on the water and be weird, and then I don't have to do all this work to be me or to not be me.
Yeah. Yeah. So often when I'm doing parts work with someone, we run into a part that is doing that, is holding the beach ball down.
Mhm.
And when we get into dialogue with it, it's like, I've been doing this for so long and I'm so tired. I would really like to stop doing this job. It was like, oh, really?
Yeah.
Okay. Well, I'd like you to stop doing this job too.
Yeah, I
And there
had that
just
experience
hasn't been
recently.
the communication between these parts to really recognize that everybody wants this job to no longer be a thing.
Yeah, I had that experience recently, and that's exactly what it felt like doing parts work in the session was I was learning about being instead of just doing healing all the time. Speaking about taking a break, that's one thing that I've done is like I'm only doing my healing work in session right now. And that's a
Hmm.
huge progress for me, right? But when I met that part, I had my little to-do list going over here, and that's what it said. It was like I just felt like exhausted. I'm laying here in this chair. I'm like, oh, that was a good thing that you just said, and I'm like, I can't even do it anymore, and I'm sick of it, and I'm putting it down. And so that's very new and real that I felt something recently. So it's cool that you brought that up.
Well, yeah, congrats on that.
Yeah, man.
Yeah. I wanted to speak just really briefly to the you were in that group and feeling the shutdown, after all these sessions and stuff. And whether it's shutdown or it's reactivity, or it's escapism, or whatever it is that comes after, it's really easy to judge it and to shame it and to feel like um, not having the tools is a sign of weakness.
Mm,
And it really, really isn't. It's just a matter of like, um, what have you been exposed to? What has been modeled
hmm
so far in life?
Yeah.
And it's really, really like it's such a valuable piece of information just to have the knowledge that, something's coming up here. is overwhelming to my system.
Mm-hmm.
Therefore, um, there's some attention, and it needs attention that is um, more gentle, more compassionate than what I have received so far.
Mm-hmm.
And so, like, I love that you were able to say it, and then you immediately received that that extra level of holding that you needed.
Oh,
And
as opposed
sometimes,
to, and I'll relate it back to being a kid and being emotional and saying, go to your room to until you can come back and engage with the family. You know,
right?
because emotions, unwanted emotions, maybe the ones like grief and fear and whatever, those aren't allowed.
Mm-hmm.
And when we get that, it sounds like what you're saying is we get that experience. That's what I knew. But instead, being attuned to and being met with compassion and care, it's like, I mean, you talk about a drug. That's a drug. You know, it's like, oh God, this feels incredible.
Yeah, 100%.
And we can, it sounds like we can, that's what parts work is a lot of this relational and meeting these parts that didn't feel like they could be vulnerable, didn't feel like they could exist, and opening that door and saying, come back in, you know, one at a time and
And
reintegrate that part back into the whole, the
yeah,
self.
and doing it in a way that restores the safety. Like I was talking earlier about pushing past the safety and the comfort risks breaking trust with
Mm-hmm.
yourself. A lot of the parts that are creating, coping mechanisms that we don't like, that are painful, or holding on emotions, or not giving us access to parts of ourselves that we want, not allowing openness or vulnerability. They are all like frozen moments when the trust was broken. And so I think one of the kind of traps that I'll see practitioners fall into with parts work is not like hyper prioritizing the internal consent. At every turn, asking the part's consent if this is right, and having kind of like an idea, an agenda of what the healing should look like. But it's so crucial to, invite it and
Mm-hmm.
to give it the opportunity to be heard and to be seen before you're imposing any of your own agenda and your
Mm-hmm.
own will.
Mm-hmm.
Um, it's like a GPS.
Yeah.
If you want to go somewhere, the most important piece of information is where you are now. Otherwise, you can never, it's not going to be able to map a path to where you want to go.
Mm-hmm.
And so as you bring in these parts, the first thing you want to go is like, who are you? What are your needs? What are your wounds? What do you need in order to feel seen? And then we start having a conversation about whether change is possible.
Right, because that part has done a lot of work to protect, and there's protector parts that come up that maybe I remember one of my experiences first doing parts work and kind of understanding this and wanting to meet parts that I was aware of throughout my week, and then going into session and be like, I can't wait to sit down with this part. Like we're gonna do this. We're gonna get the outcome, and then just getting silence and learning about like, oh yeah, that part is it's not going to show up through force. You know, it's more of this invitation, and it's almost like I think of like a wounded animal. You know, you bring a wounded animal, a dog that's been beaten, let's say, into your home. Dog's like is dangerous, you know, and it's reactive. And not that our parts are dangerous, but it's more like we don't just, hey, come into the house and sit on the couch with me and let's watch a TV. It's like, no, can I put the food out at the dock and can I sit further away in the corner and just go, I'm here. I'm not going anywhere. And I think that's a couple of inner dialogue things that helped me and that I really needed to hear was that, hey, I'm not going to change you. I'm not here to fix you. I'm here to be with you. And I'm not going anywhere. You
Mm-hmm.
know, and over time, that silence, that protector part that's like, no way, dude, this is not safe. That starts to go like, okay, I'm listening now. Like, you can be here. And that continues to build to where now we're having a full-on conversation and we're feeling the emotions and the sensations and get excited to see that part instead of like, is this going to be too much?
Yeah, there's a phrase I use that I really like when there are parts that are not ready. And talking about protector parts, sometimes another part will come in to protect the part you're wanting to talk to, and you get like these layers of protection.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and sometimes we don't even recognize that these are parts of us that we can have dialogue with, and they just feel like barriers.
Yeah.
And so, what I'll say is, um, whatever the resistance is, it's not in the way. It is the way. Like
Yes.
instead of having, you want to talk to that part that doesn't let you open up and be vulnerable, and you're like, that's where I want to go. And then you have this wall come up in front of you. Well, instead of doing everything you can to try and get around that wall, let's have a conversation with the wall and see what it's going to take for there to be safety when
Yeah.
you reach the part that is on the other side of that wall.
Yeah.
Because the wall, it knows way better than your conscious, intellectual mind what is needed for the thing it's protecting, like how to treat it correctly. I had a really incredible experience a few years ago where I was doing a bit of parts work, and there was this kind of fragile, delicate piece somewhere deep inside. I'm like, oh, that's that's the key. That's the root of what I'm dealing with. I'm going to try and get there. And every time I went to go in and find out what that delicate piece was, I had this barrier come up, and I was starting to get frustrated. And then I
Mm.
realized, oh, this frustration is actually a protection. Let me talk to the frustration. And
Yes.
it completely changed my relationship to my anger.
Mm.
Because when I started that conversation, my anger said, you're not skilled enough to touch that delicate part. You'll hurt it again.
Mm.
And I went, oh, you know better than I do. So rather than thinking that I know best, I'm just gonna take my cues from you. And all of a sudden it was no longer a barrier. It was like a tiger that just sat next to me. And I didn't take any movement towards the delicate thing. I just like mirrored whatever the tiger was doing. And that completely changed the level of safety. It turns out it was about, you know, um, boundaries of mine around my needs that I wasn't meeting, that I wasn't
Yeah.
recognizing. I was pushing
Yeah.
past them
Mm-hmm.
in order to make relationship work.
Mm-hmm.
And so it was like, as long as you're doing this, you can't access your authenticity.
And you're
And
slowly building safety and trust with those parts and with your system as well through that.
yeah, and it also made it so that the anger didn't have to be loud anymore. It could step in really quietly, and I would see it and go, "Oh, let me step back and ask you what am I missing here? Because there's something in my shadow that you know about because you're here,
Mm-hmm.
and I need to know about."
That's really interesting. I like that. It's like I can feel in my system as we're talking about that, just like that calming in my system. It's like a so I like that. I really like that. I'm gonna look for that with some of my parts work. It's beautiful and thank you for sharing that,
Yeah. Oh my God, my pleasure.
man. Dude, I've had this has been a great conversation, and I could go all day long with you. But I want to put like a bookmark right here, and we can certainly come back and do a round two and kind of shift gears into. I imagine someone's listening to this podcast and they're like, wow, Sermine has really been through a lot. I love his approach where there's a softer, gentler way working with these parts. Um, in a way that builds awareness and teaches me how to be with myself and build capacity and ultimately get to where I want, but not treat it like a goal. I think that was probably my best takeaway is not making like a goal. I'm really going to look at that myself. But um, first off, what kind of person typically reaches out, and how would they get in touch with you, and maybe what would that look like?
Yeah, I get a lot of different types of people reaching out.
Mm-hmm.
What I'll say is that I don't work in crisis.
Mm-hmm.
So if you're ready to change patterns, change cycles, to learn what it means to connect, to feel, if you are also, looking to put yourself and your journey in the perspective, in the bigger perspective of ancestry,
Mm-hmm.
um, I work both in that realm spiritually and also more clinically. Uh, just if there's a readiness to change, then you're so welcome. It'll be, I imagine, in the show notes, but Hearthlight Wellness is my website. You can I have sliding scale on there as well. All of that's just bookable, at your convenience. You just book right there. I work pretty much all of my work is online, so
Nice.
yeah. And I deliberately chose to work um, through certifications as opposed to licensure so
Mm-hmm.
that I don't have the barrier of state borders. So, really, anyone is welcome. I don't think people are different when you cross the state border. So,
Yeah.
anyone
Yeah.
is welcome.
Yeah. Yeah. I like that,
uh,
man, and I think there's a huge benefit in that as well.
yeah. Yeah, so you can find me there. I do have an Instagram at Hearthlight Wellness. I'm not really a social media person, but I try. You can get a feel of me for sure there. And periodically I also run kind of a basic intro course, Nervous System Rewire 101. Um, Not sure when the next cohort of that will be, but we'll put in the show notes also the link to get on the priority list so you can be the first to know when the doors are going to open again for that. And that's kind of the foundations, everything you need to know to really get started working with your nervous system and rewiring, a lot of the stuff we talked about today, um, but including the assessments so that you can know what tools are right for your specific unique system. And
Mm-hmm.
then I teach, um, 14 to 20 neuro tools that you
Yeah.
can do.
Awesome, man. Sermine, it sounds like you're doing great work, and anybody that's listening to this podcast, I'm certainly has picked up on that, and you've given us lots of interesting topics and tools that can help others. And if somebody, what's the best way to work to reach out? Is it through your website?
Yeah, do the website's best. Mhm.
So you heard the man. If you're interested, if this is resonating, he's not going to judge you if you're not living in New Mexico. And looks like he's got lots of different certifications and tools when it comes to this work, and certainly gonna treat you the right way and be gentle, and obviously he's doing lots of really good work. So, dude, thank you so much for coming on and chatting with us. Appreciate having you. We'll put all this stuff in the show notes, access to his nervous system one-on-one course, and different ways of contacting him through his website. For everybody that's listening, if you have any comments or questions, we love that you leave them below. I'll be tagging Sermine in the YouTube video and through the audio, all the audio platforms as well. So if you have questions, if you want to know how to contact us, all that information is going to be in the show notes. And we love getting comments. That way, I can build some Q&A and do some additional videos as well. So once again, the Sermine, thank you so much for coming on today, brother. It was great to see you and connect with you and learn more about you and your work. And just hope you have a great 2026.
Thank you. Same to you. And thank you so much for your work, your outreach, making this so much more accessible.
Absolutely, man. All right. Great to see you. And I'm sure we'll talk to you again soon, buddy.